All right, Mike Coppinger, ESPN Boxing Insider. You've been working hard these last few days, breaking a number of different stories. And the one I want to talk about first is Canelo Alvarez and his decision to fight Edgar Berlanga on September 14th. Now, this wasn't really a surprise. We know that Berlanga was a finalist along with Chris Eubank Jr. And if you're going to put those two fighters side by side, if nothing else, Berlanga makes more sense. He's more known commodity in the U.S. So unless Canelo was going to go over to the U.K., this was most likely going to be Edgar Berlanga's slot on September 14th. The question I have for you is kind of what took so long? Like, we're taping this on the 25th of July. You broke this a couple of days ago. Usually for a fight on this Mexican Independence Day weekend, you get it done a little bit sooner, right? Like into June, give yourself some promotional time, maybe have a couple of press conferences. This feels kind of late in the calendar for a deal like this to come together on a date like this. What do you know about kind of the negotiations to make this fight happen?
Well, Chris, first of all, I think if you look at the last, half dozen Canelo Alvarez fights, the negotiations have dragged out for each one of them
Good
because
point.
everyone is, basically their Super Bowl, their lottery ticket, and the negotiations are always really tricky. Everyone tries to extract every single dollar as they should. And as you mentioned, in this case, it was a two-man race between Eubank and Berlanga, and they were both driving a hard bargain. I heard Eubank priced himself out. I think this was a matter of who's more realistic. And again, Berlanga had the edge for the reasons you mentioned. But I think if Eubank would have came in and undercut him, so to speak, he could have got the fight probably. I think that's where it was at. But I believe it was the Canelo Munguia fight in May. That was Cinco de Mayo weekend. That one, from my recollection, didn't get done until early March. So, yeah, it's just a constant Canelo problem. I think he's missed his preferred holiday in September so many times at this point, that Mexican Independence Day weekends, that I think even if it wasn't ideal with the turnaround time this time, I think he really wanted to make sure it happens. Especially, I think, and I don't know this, because UFC and Dana White are going on that same date. And I think Canelo as well as I do. He's pretty territorial, right? And with good reason. He's earned this. This is a holiday. It's always been reserved for boxing's top star, whether it was Floyd Mayweather or Oscar De La Hoya. And I think Canelo was not going to be pushed off his date again.
What do you think of the decision? What do you think of the decision to go on this date, though? Because it is going to go up against a major UFC event in Las Vegas, right? Like, it'll be the first combat sports event at the Sphere, which will be a big deal. Like, that will soak up a lot of the combat sports oxygen for that weekend. I know that, from what I was told, there were discussions about the 7th, the 14th, even as late as the 28th. I know DAZN's got a date on the 21st with AJ out in at Wembley. But what do you think? Like, is this the right decision to go on a day like this, which is a popular boxing day, but they are going to face some pretty stiff competition in UFC?
Yeah, I think you make a good point about the oxygen, so to speak, especially ESPN, right? The ESPN's televising the UFC pay-per-view on ESPN Plus. So there's going to be I think it's going to take a hit there. But look, you and I both know this is a big holiday for Mexicans. They really converge on Vegas in droves on this date, regardless. There's so many different Latin concerts that they always present on this weekends. And I think at the gate, I don't think it affects it much. I think Canelo's going to bring in fans no matter what. He's the second biggest star in combat sports after Conor McGregor, who really doesn't fight anymore anyway. And, I don't know who they're going to be putting on UFC. I've heard some rumors about Charles Oliveira or Sean O'Malley, but I doubt it's going to be Conor. I think where it could be heard is maybe the pay-per-view. Although, again, I think it's different audiences. I think the UFC has a largely predominant white audience. And I think, Canelo obviously has a Latin audience. And I think there's enough room for both.
They're going to sell this hard as the latest installment of the Mexico-Puerto Rico rivalry. But you and I both know that you have one great Mexican and a very much unproven Puerto Rican in Edgar Berlanga. Edgar Berlanga is a fan-friendly fighter, but his last win over Paddy McGrory, who is I would say a B- fighter at best, was probably the best win of his career. So Berlanga is going to make a big jump in a fight like this. And look, I don't take social media to be the end all be all, but the backlash I've seen on it so far has been pretty significant, where even though people knew this was coming, the criticism has kind of come in waves. Like, is this a sellable fight on any level in your mind?
I do think this is one of those examples, Chris, where social media is rather representative of what the public's thinking at large. It's just hard sell. I haven't seen the odds yet. I imagine Canelo's going to be minus 2,000, minus 2,500 in that range. We all know what's going to happen on fight night. On the plus side for Canelo, he's going to get a knockout, I'm sure, finally, for the first time since he knocked out Caleb Plant in November of 2021. And I think, at least for Berlanga, you could say that he'll sell the fight well. He's charismatic. He's happy to do media interviews, which is important. Canelo's not going to have to really put the promotion on his back, so to speak. I think people watch Canelo Alvarez no matter what. Now, I think where maybe he gets hurt is I do think from talking to people that there's a large segment of boxing fans that will buy the pay-per-views if they think it is worthy, and they will steal it because it's quite easy to, I guess, if not. And I think you'll have a lot of, I think you're going to have a really big uptick in piracy just from what I think people, how they view the fight and how they think. I'm sure you've heard this too, right? They'll buy it if they want to and they think it's worthy. And I think what's really glaring here is Benavidez is out there. Benavidez wasn't out there. It would be different. And I think now you're at the point where fans are saying, we know he's never going to fight Benavidez, and maybe there is some backlash or protest.
Yeah. And look, I think Berlanga will sell the fight really well. Whatever they do in terms of press tour, build up, I think Berlanga is going to bring his A game to that. I think the question is it's not a question to me, can Berlanga win? It's, can he go out in the same way or better that Jaime Munguia went out? I think most people walked away from that Canelo Munguia fight, maybe not impressed with Munguia, but with a loftier opinion of him than they had going in. I mean, Munguia going in was also very much untested. Not as untested as Berlanga, but not tested on the Canelo Alvarez level. I think people expected him to get knocked out in the 4th or 5th round. He gets knocked down in the 4th round, gets up, and he keeps throwing punches. I think if Berlanga can have that kind of performance, I don't want to say people will be satisfied, because you don't want to watch a fight that you know the outcome. But I think for Berlanga, to me, his best case scenario is staying on his feet for 12 rounds and making the fight as competitive as possible.
I'm going to go a little different there. Forget about 12 rounds. It's just that when you're a guy like Berlanga, who, let's face it, no one thinks he deserves his opportunity, for better or worse. He got it though, so make the most of it. I don't care if you go 12 rounds, frankly. All I care about is you've been talking trash for years and years. Just go for it. Try to beat him.
Yeah.
Try to knock him out. If you get knocked out, so be it. Don't make this a game of survival or of trying to brag, like Charlo, right? Charlo bragged and bragged, I'm going to do this, Lions only, and then he ran around the ring for 12 rounds. That's what I don't want to see. If Edgar Berlanga really tries to go for it and gets knocked out, so be it, but I'll have a lot of respect for that.
So you want some McNeely-Tyson vibes in this fight?
Yes, I want to see Berlanga try to wrap him in a cocoon, yes.
Charging out there, looking for a knockout in the 1st round. We don't get it, you get knocked out. So Canelo's going to fight in mid-September. Terrence Crawford's back in action in a couple of weeks. We know Turki Al-Sheikh is in Los Angeles right now. We saw some pictures he posted from the Wildcard gym just a couple of days ago. Do you think we're barreling towards that Canelo Crawford fight? It's a fight that Turki has said he's interested in. Crawford is out there campaigning for. Kind of the last domino in all this is Canelo, who at this point has not expressed much interest in that fight. But look, he may change his tune if Crawford has an impressive performance on August 3rd against Madrimov. Do you think that fight is very much in play for either later this year or early next year?
Not sure we're barreling toward it, so to speak, but I do think it's very, very much in play. I spoke to Turki Al-Sheikh the other day. He told me that if Canelo wants to negotiate, he'll deal directly with Canelo, and that's it. He's done dealing with all the middlemen, and I don't blame him. I know these things get complicated, especially with all the money at stake. But look, I think Canelo Crawford finds himself in a very unique position now with Benavidez and all the outcry for that fight. And clearly it's not going to happen. I think fans are now come to terms with that. There's only one consolation fight out there, and that's going to be Crawford. And if, again, Canelo, Crawford's 3 weight classes below Canelo. He's moving up 1 weight class to fight Madrimov. And if he can look really good against Madrimov, that will make the fight a bit more legitimate, I think, at least in Canelo's eyes too. Canelo has said Crawford's too small, this and that. I do believe they're looking at February for Canelo Crawford. And you got to figure that Canelo is like anyone else. I think he is sensitive to criticism. And I think, he's taking this easy fight, against Berlanga in September. I think he's going to have to deliver a bigger fight next year. Certainly there's going to be a lot of money coming his way, I'm sure, to make that fight if he's realistic. And, it's all relatively speaking. But I wanted to say, I think Madrimov is a very, very dangerous opponent.
I agree.
I don't think Crawford's the type to overlook an opponent. I know he's trained very hard for this fight, and he's a unique gym rat, but he's going to have to look good against Madrimov first.
Yeah, and he's months away from his 37th birthday.
1 month away. Yeah, September.
Yeah, he trains the right way. He lives the right way. So I can see his game aging well. And from what we saw against Errol Spence, he's still very much an elite fighter. But look, Madrimov's 29 years old, a full-fledged junior middleweight, great footwork, great amateur background. I'm completely on board with you there. That said, if Crawford does look great, I mean, the most marketable fight for Canelo was going to be Crawford, because Crawford's going to come out guns blazing after that fight saying, I want Canelo. He's probably going to be ringside for Canelo against Berlanga. He is going to be hunting that fight. And I think people will start to believe that if Crawford can look as dominant at 54 as he did at 47, that, look, maybe there's a chance his skill set might be enough. Height-wise, they're not going to be that much far off, when they square off against each other. I think a dominant win for Crawford will do a lot to push the public interest in making that fight happen.
Yeah, and it's funny, as I'm sure you have, I've polled a lot of boxing people that are in the industry, and about half of them will tell me Canelo knocks him out, he's too big. And the other half will say, oh, Crawford's too skilled, I think he beats him, outboxes him. So I'm in the camp where I think it's a very competitive fight, actually, and I would lean towards Canelo for sure, because I do think weight classes matter, especially when you're talking about two A+ all-time greats. But again, I think this is, like you said, this is so important against Madrimov for Crawford to look dominant. He doesn't have to knock him out, but he can't be struggling, and he can't look like he's out of his depth on the weight.
Yeah, that would make a fight against Canelo that much more difficult a sell. Quickly on Benavidez, you mentioned him. He made the decision to stay at 175. He says he's been assured by the WBC, Mauricio Sulaiman, that he will get the winner of Artur Beterbiev against Dimitri Bivol. If I was David Benavidez and Mauricio Sulaiman told me it was raining outside, I would stick my hand out the window, because Mauricio has done nothing for David Benavidez, a Mexican-American fighter, and Mauricio has done nothing to help push him towards that Canelo shot. But I guess your reaction to Benavidez, finally kind of shutting the door, at least at 168, on a fight with Canelo.
Well, I mean, first off, I don't think there's ever made any sense for Benavidez to move back down to 168. He's a really big guy, and it's not easy for him to make that weight. And I think he'll be better at 175. Not to mention, I don't like it when fighters move up in weight and then come back down. You're burning through muscle. It's not great from history. On the Mauricio Sulaiman front, first off, Mauricio has no control over that. I mean, this is a fight for 4 titles. If one of the guys, Beterbiev or Bivol, whoever wins, doesn't want to fight Benavidez, they won't. So, look, I want to see Benavidez versus the Beterbiev Bivol winner, but who knows? Maybe Beterbiev Bivol is a great fight, as I expect it to be, and we want to see a rematch too. So the fight that we should be seeing this fall or soon is Benavidez versus Morel. They're both at PBC. I think David Morel is an absolute killer. That guy does not get enough exposure for whatever reason. I think he's a very dangerous fighter. I don't know that Benavidez beats Morel, but that's the fight I want to see. They're both, Morel's fighting on August 3rd as well. They're both at 170. This is going to be his 175-pound debut. I don't think it's any coincidence that he's moving up as well. And when I spoke to Benavidez a couple of months ago, he said he wanted Morel later this year. That should be the first fight. Let the winner get Beterbiev Bivol.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds weird, but I kind of get him not, running into a Morel fight, because Morel is still, like, we know who Morel is. We know how good Morel is, but he's got 10 professional fights, and he's been kind of inactive, 2 fights in 2023, a couple in 2022. Just hasn't had the visibility that I think you need to build that fight into what it should be. Really, for Benavidez, it comes down to Turki Al-Sheikh. I mean, Turki Al-Sheikh has said he wants to see Benavidez in against the winner of Beterbiev and Bivol. If he decides to put the cash up, that's what's going to make that fight happen. Not anything, to your point, that the WBC says about sanctioning it for that belt.